Hello everyone. Today we have a very special video for you. Let's say that you're in the market for a sporty car and you hear about Mazda's iconic and historic slogan, Zoom Zoom. So you come across this car, a Mazda Miata, sort of the halo car of their lineup. This is a 2007 Mazda MX-5 Miata. And then you go and you see it and you're like, oh, only 2 doors, only 2 seats. I want something more practical. And you see they also make this, the Mazda 6 midsize sedan. You look in both owners' manuals and they both say Zoom Zoom. This is a 2016 Mazda 6. So both of these vehicles are from the Zoom Zoom era of Mazda. However, there are dramatic differences between the two. Mazda Miata, rear-wheel drive. Mazda 6, front-wheel drive. Mazda 6 is 750 pounds heavier than the Miata. It has a 58-42 front-rear weight distribution compared to the Miata's 52-48 weight distribution. Miata has a 2-liter 4-cylinder, makes 166 horsepower, 140 foot-pounds of torque, connected to a 5-speed manual. And the Mazda 6 has a 2.5-liter 4-cylinder, making 184 horsepower, 185 foot-pounds of torque, connected to a 6-speed automatic. This Mazda 6 is from the Skyactiv era of Mazda, and the Miata is pre-Skyactiv. Different chassis. The Mazda Miata rides on chassis that's related to the RX-8 sports car. So the question is, these are both Zoom Zoom vehicles. Do they truly share that Zoom Zoom DNA? All right, here we are in the Mazda Miata, 2007. Lots of aftermarket things going on. We have a navigation thing.
Doesn't work too well.
So, otherwise, lots of hard plastics everywhere. Nothing really soft to touch. The whole door is a piece of plastic with some straps. Basic steering wheel. No real buttons here. Basic analog gauges. But this car isn't really about frills. This car is about enjoying the drive, and so that's what we're going to attempt to do here. Even 4th gear, about 45 miles an hour, 2,700 RPM. This thing is not really meant for fuel economy. We're in 5th gear, top gear.
Yeah.
45 miles an hour and we're already above 2,000 RPM. This thing is about sort of raw experience. The seats are on the firm side, but they hold you in place relatively well. I wish that the seat angle was a little bit higher. There could be more support there. You're low to the ground, it's just a visceral experience.
Yeah, with the road noise, it might be hard to hear music unless it's like real loud, but
it's like, yeah, there's no indication. You have to like duck and it's tucked under there, so you have to look to see if the little green light's on. Yeah, below 2,000 RPM, this thing really is like, what are you doing? There's like no point. I'll tell you one thing that's never going to happen in this car.
yeah.
You're never going to forget that there's an exhaust back there. You're like, oh yeah, I put an aftermarket exhaust. No, it's always like, I'm here. Remember the financial decision you made.
You're not going to think it's an electric Miata or something.
No. We're about to start the fun.
Hey.
Let's see, off throttle, and in a turn, you can use the wow.
Hey, good.
A little bit of chattering. Oh, the steering is light, but it's direct. It feels like a go-kart. The ride is stiff. this car just puts a smile on your face. Like, I just can't help but smile right now because it's so, it's that thing everyone says about Miatas, that you have so much fun and you feel like you're going 80 and then you look down and you're going 30. Especially with the sound like this, it eggs you to go on.
The lightweight nature just makes it so agile.
Fifth gear, just coasting down the hill. Yeah, once the steering goes beyond about 30 degrees, there's just this bite point where it's just really darty. That is so fun. Like, off the gas, pretty much instant response. It really makes you, like, you feel every undulation of the pavement. You can see it, and even this is a relatively fresh pavement, and I can feel every imperfection in the road. It's a rattly, bumpy kind of a ride, but I'm going 32 miles an hour and I'm enjoying it.
Not something you could say in every car.
Like in a Corvette or something, this would just be so pedestrian.
In a Corolla, more pedestrian.
And the thing is, there's no sport mode, there's nothing to amplify the experience of this car because it just is already what it is.
Roundabout maneuvers. So grippy.
Off throttle rotation, like, it's just beautiful. Even off throttle is so neutral. You can use the throttle to come out on rotation. So fun, so go-karty. This car does not know the word refinement. That's not a word in its vocabulary. But what it does know is fun. And not great visibility out. Kind of a short windshield, you know, thin A-pillars, but, you know. And then a tight right-hander going into an uphill right here. This is understeer city, typically. This car really, it does what you tell it to do most of the time. Like anything that you, and sometimes if you're coming from a normal commuter car, it exceeds expectations. You're like, a car can do that? This is the entry point to fun. This is the entry point to realizing what cars can actually do to be satisfying and put a smile on your face. It's not all about sport mode and going straight in a fast line, or fast in a straight line. This is a car that says that fun doesn't have to mean you're going to end up in the trees. Now, you can make this car that with a bunch of add-ons, and this car is, I would say, halfway there, especially with the sound of the exhaust. This is more from the RX-8 era of Mazda than it is like the ND Miata era. This is pre-Skyactiv and all of that. Just dancing around that 52-48, pretty close to a 50-50 weight distribution. That really helps in situations like that. The rear seems kind of light on its feet, but it's also pushing the car around, and it does a wonderful job.
It's like correcting any imbalances.
Yeah. And the fact that this car came with 205 profile tires. It now has 245 profile tires, which is a little bit optimistic for the frame of the car and what it can handle, but what that needs is a lot more grip, a lot more contact patch. This is, again, because of the exhaust, a neighbor is going to think, why is this car going 80 miles an hour in front of my front lawn? And they look out, it's just a Miata going because that's all you need to do to have fun in this thing. loves traction. It loves pavement. It doesn't shoot for the trees.
You don't have to worry about understeer in any moments. There you go. There's some laws of traction for you.
Yeah. I don't think that in the Mazda 6 we can do what we did right there. I don't, just a hunch, that a front-wheel drive sedan is not going to drift around a turn under power. You know, this car lives on the twisties. That's where this car loves to be. Otherwise, the one word to describe this car in this particular form is drone.
It's constant. Yeah, you're gonna, you might get sick of that after a while.
This is not a road trip car. Unless they're taking a road trip to get a better road trip car. That's the only application. The main storage space in this car is the passenger seat. That's where you can put the most amount of stuff. Other than that, I mean, just listen.
Not the finest qualities.
Everything's hard. This car really likes to live, you know, the horsepower, peak horsepower, and peak torque are both higher than where they exist in the Mazda 6. Because in the Mazda 6, the people who buy that car aren't looking to rev it out. They want to just put 40% throttle at the most and feel like it's powerful enough. So they have to put those numbers lower. But this is all about experiencing the noise, experiencing the limit of the car. So sure, let's have those peaks a little bit higher. Have the consumer chase after that. Make it a little bit more of a game that way. Otherwise, in the Mazda 6, it's kind of like almost punishing you
if you go high.
If you go high, because hey, there's nothing out here. You've already passed the peak of this car's performance. I think I looked at this car, like the peak horsepower is somewhere in the 5,000s, and the peak torque is somewhere in the 4,000s. In the Mazda 6, peak horsepower I think is in the low 5s, and peak torque is in the low 3s.
Wow, yeah, that's a huge difference.
So, yeah. And also just the gearing. Like right now, if you go into fifth gear in the Mazda 6, because, spoiler alert, that's the car that I live with. This is the car that he lives with. Fifth gear at 45 miles an hour in the Mazda 6 is about 1,600 RPM. Right now, we're going about 2,100 RPM. And this is the most you got. Any highway driving, it's only going to rev higher. It's going to drone louder.
And so economy for highway driving isn't the best.
There's something about this car that when you come to a stop and all the noise goes away, you almost go, finally. Driving experience and enhance it and amplify it into this little package that stock has less than 170 horsepower, and yet it's still, as a 17-year-old car, still very fun. Is it quiet? No. Is it comfortable? No. Is it safe? That's a relative term. Is it efficient? That sort of depends how you drive it. I think this car was rated, I believe it was 25 city, 30 highway was the IHS rating for the 5-speed. That sort of makes sense. You could be efficient in town, but just because of the short gearing, you're not going to get good highway mileage, even with how light and sort of flowy and aerodynamic the shape of the car is. Is it efficient? Kind of. Is it fun? Hell yes. And I feel like the Mazda engineers, they were like, that's the only box we need to check. As long as it's fun, who cares about everything else? In the Mazda 6, immediately I'm sitting up much higher, and there was an attention to style on the inside. You have stitching, nice lines, chrome accents. Now, in contrast, everything that was hard in that car, a little bit soft. Not hard, it's hard-ish, but it's also a little bit padded. Soft. Soft-ish.
Maybe harder.
Soft-ish, 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 soft. That's soft. This is soft.
This is also soft.
This is soft. Power seat. Even though it doesn't have thigh angle adjustment, the thigh angle is better. And even with the windows down, zero exhaust sound. There's engine sound, no exhaust sound. With the windows up,
road noise is almost not existent.
2,000 RPM, and it's just... I feel like I'm driving an electric car in relativity.
So silent.
And here we are, 45 miles an hour, fifth gear, 1,600 RPM, just like I said, versus 2,100 RPM in the other car. So you go up to fourth gear. This car has more torque. From the factory, it does 45 foot-pounds more torque. But again, it's front-wheel drive, and it's 750 pounds heavier. That makes a difference.
750 pounds extra of sound patterning is what it feels like.
Everything's just softer, more plush, more isolated from the road, more refined.
You do feel the occasional shake or rumble on the road, but it's not constant.
No. This was sort of the transition point in Mazda's history, this 2016 model year, where they started to pepper the inside with nicer styling. This is the very beginning. This is the genesis of Mazda's upscale phase. Just a few model years after this is where Zoom Zoom disappears from all of their marketing. So this is kind of the hybrid of wanting to go up market and compete with maybe a used luxury car versus being a fun alternative to the mainstream. People think that cars are too low, they have to have an SUV to sit up high. No, they just need to spend an hour in a Miata and then come back to this and they'll realize that sedans are actually good enough. The Mazda 6, people complained that it actually had more road noise than its other competitors. So the competitors are actually quieter than this. But within the Mazda lineup, this is a Lexus compared to that Miata.
This is also a car that, in terms of being in like traffic and like lights and intersections, it's not a hassle in any way, where it's not something that you ever consider to be an issue, but it does slightly deteriorate or make the experience less enjoyable with a Mazda 5.
Yeah. MX-5. Mazda 5, that's another video. But perhaps there's a reason that this was not called the MX-6. If they wanted it to be like the Miata, they would have called it the MX-6. This is Skyactiv, which was Mazda's attempt to get as good fuel economy as possible from a traditional 6-speed automatic. They did that with very high compression ratios and just their philosophy of making everything light. This car, even though it's 750 pounds heavier than the Miata, only about 3,300 pounds, which in the mid-size sedan segment is on the light side. That's why you get amplified road noise compared to its competitors, but it's also why you get good mileage.
I feel like I could pour glasses of champagne and not spill anything. Where in the MX-5, I don't know if I get to not spill.
You would break the glass before you even poured anything in it. Like, I went over a speed bump in that Miata, and I thought I broke something. In the car and me. Steering, I would actually say, is a little bit heavier than the Miatas, but it's a half a notch less communicative. Still very responsive, but it doesn't quite have that go-karty sense. It's like someone took the Miata feeling and then wrapped foam padding around it, where it's still sort of there, but it's a little bit softer, a little bit slower. Sport mode engaged, all right. It just downshifted, traction control off. Let's see what we can do with this thing. You have to drive it differently. And a trail brake, all the rotation is going to come from off throttle, and then you have to gas it on at the end. You can't use the throttle for rotation. It still has that go-karty feeling, a lot more body roll, but it's actually pretty responsive. even though we've downshifted, did you just chew some horrible fruit gum?
Don't worry. The roll's more noticeable, but the grip's still there.
Good grip. This has 225 profile tires. A little bit more of the engine sound in sport mode. It's a much higher pitched tone than the meatier, deeper sound from the exhaust in the Miata, but it's still all the sounds up front. There's absolutely nothing coming from behind, even though ironically this has twin exhausts and the Miata only has a single exhaust. It almost feels like when you're chucking it around turns, the front half of it is really eager, and then the back half, while it's not hindering the car, it's way back there. And it's like, wait for me! You can kind of feel like the steering wheel is directly connected to those front tires, and they are doing a lot of good stuff. Direct handling, direct steering, but you have a lot of car back there. Front half of this car feels like a very quiet, soft Miata. That's what I'm getting from it. But it does have
the directness.
It does have directness. It does have that dartiness. And guess what's behind us? An ND Miata.
How appropriate.
And even over 2,000 RPM, when you can start to hear the engine more, it doesn't have an emotional soundtrack. It doesn't give you a sound that makes you want to rev it out. It almost is like, am I hurting this thing? It's not raspy, it's not unrefined, it's not gritty sounding. It's just kind of... nothing exciting. Off throttle. A little bit of understeer and then power out of it. Even in sport mode, the throttle response is not as immediate, not as aggressive as in the Miata. Gas. It's there, but it doesn't give you that surge of acceleration. Like we said, the Miata is rated 25 city, 30 highway. This was rated 26 city and 37 highway.
Huge difference there.
That's what higher gearing and an extra gear will do. All right, sport mode. You can feel the back tires are kind of skidding across. They're not really doing anything, because the thing is, in order to get this car to rotate, you have to be off throttle. See if we can trail brake it in.
I'm honestly impressive in terms of...
It likes to play. It is willing to play. And you turn off sport mode and playtime's over. Okay. Wow, the position is different. This car did come. You could get the Mazda 6 in 2016. You could get the bottom two trims, the Sport and the Touring, came with a 6-speed manual.
Oh.
You could get that. Understeer City. You remember what the Miata did through here.
The thing is, that wasn't understeering. I turned in initially, and it stayed. Or for the Miata, I turned in. I realized I turned in too much, and then I had to undo it because it wants to turn so easily. So.
Let's see how this does.
Oh God! It's just it's
the weight and the extra body roll.
For me, it wasn't the understeer. It was the ability to change directions. Yeah, it was like the right to the left. That was the challenge.
Well, the thing is, you have to do that off throttle. Yeah. With the Miata, that extra gas will help it rotate around. With this car, power on a turn, the front end's in the trees. With the Miata, power on a turn, the back end's in the trees. That's the difference. Now, one thing I will notice, looking at the right side window, I see the side of the car, and the tires are tucked under the bodywork. Whereas with Miata, I felt like I was looking at a dually. Where there was the bodywork and then the tires sticking out about an inch outside of the wheel well.
Yeah, the rotation at its peak is right when it let off. But assuming you get that rotation, once you do get back to the gas, it's not bad at all. I'm trying to think of like the feeling, like with that one, yeah, I was like, you felt you couldn't help but smile due to the sportiness. This one is just, it's enjoyable that it is sporty, but that is, it definitely is a distinctness.
When the designers were in the room sketching what a Miata should be, they said it has to be fun, and that's it. Doesn't have to be quiet, doesn't have to be comfortable, doesn't have to be efficient. This car had to be more things because it competes with very capable cars. It had to be kind of quiet, it had to be kind of comfortable, it has to be kind of roomy. And hell to it, let's also make it fun. That's what happened here. And because of that, the amount of fun that they were able to put in, I see that connection. The fun that's here is the same fun that's in the Miata, it's just there's less of it. It's kind of like how, let's say someone has like big ears, but the mother doesn't, and so their son kind of has big ears.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it is. Oh, there's some DNA, but there's other DNA interfering with it, so it's not as pure as the original. That's what's happening. I'm glad that Mazda's kept the Miata around so that they remember where they came from, they remember who they are, they remember that that's their roots. And the day that Mazda stops making the Miata, Mazda, I believe its soul has died. But it's in this car, and it's in the Miata.
Before the road imperfections, that must be a change. I mean, I don't know if it's the suspension or the ride height, but that's definitely something that I don't feel in the Subaru, the Outback as much.
No. With that, you just feel imperfections with the car, more than the road.